personality types of people who leave a lot of tabs open. They're curious and information hungry, high openness to experience, low conscientiousness or executive dysfunction.
How many unread texts do you have right now in your messages?
I turned that off because there's so many.
That's how bad it is. How many unread emails?
I don't know, probably 160,000.
I go to inbox zero at least twice a week, and I make sure that all my messages
those are the kind of people that
are organized.
Things in the world. No, they're not.
No, they're Notion people. That's the thing, Alex. I think your dislike of product managers is the narcissism of small differences. You might be spiritually a product manager.
Shall we get started? I'm ready. I'm prepared.
Let's get started.
I've done my research.
Welcome to People vs. Algorithms. I'm Brian Morrissey, joined as always by Alex Schleifer, who sounds great. Alex, welcome.
Thank you. Hi.
Troy Young, who
Did
just
you say
popped his in.
Schleifer? What is the proper pronunciation?
That's exactly how you both said
Schleifer.
it. Schleifer. Like Michelle Pfeiffer.
Pfeiffer with a schle?
We were doing a great intro for once, Troy, and you just sabotaged it.
That's a personality type too.
Yeah.
Just to start things off, we're going to be doing a Google-focused episode today. We've got some appetizers, but first, I want to remind everyone we're doing some kind of version of PVA Live at the Cannes Lions, which is a big advertising conference. I don't know it's not just advertising, it's all media now. Troy's unsure if he's going to show up. He's leaving it to like the last minute. So if you don't register, the chances are Troy will not show up, but we're going to have a wonderful event. It's going to be at the Meredith Villa, it's a very lovely home. We're going to be doing it by the pool. We're going to be joined by Sarah Fisher, who has been on this part. She's been on this one, right?
She was, yeah. She was brilliant.
Yeah, she's great. She's got her finger on the pulse of all the changes going on in media. This is going to be on Thursday afternoon. It's on June 19th. It is at 3:30 p.m. at the Meredith Villa. I'll leave a link in the show notes. Anything to add on that, Troy?
I had some good times in Cannes. Now it seems like sort of an orgy of salespeople and ad tech people.
Those are the best kinds of orgies, I'm told.
Is it while Rome is burning?
I have to be, I told you what my conundrum is. I have to be in London a week later. And so I'm not going to do 2 trips. So I'd have to figure out, what I do between Cannes and something else. And I don't want to spend an entire week in Cannes because I'm not interested in doing that.
I'm going to see my nephews in Geneva if you want to come.
Can I come?
Sure. I didn't ask my in-laws, but I'm sure they'd be happy to have
Uncle
an
Troy?
executive like you show up. Troy's here. Yeah, then we're going to go on to Paris. It'd be great. We got some reader feedback this week. AB is starting to have a legion of fans. Just letting you know on that.
As he should.
He's going to join us.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know when, though. I want to run through a couple of quick things. I think everyone is starting to understand where their years are shaping up. Washington Post said they're having buyouts. They're offering basically anyone who's been at the company longer than 10 years. Business Insider cut 21% of their staff today.
So Brian, you know that company well. Why did they cut 21%?
What, Business Insider?
Yes.
Oh, well, I mean, it seems pretty clear. I mean, Business Insider was a winner from the last era. Congratulations. But it was the last era. I mean, it was a classic traffic machine. And that was sort of epitomized, I think, by its pivot to dropping the business from Business Insider to become Insider. And they started creating a lot of cheese content and chasing a lot of Facebook traffic. And it worked until it stopped working. I think that's the perils of this business. Now, the Washington Post is a totally different story. They're also, they did some targeted buyouts. They're saying anyone in the video department can take a buyout. Any copy editors, I didn't know they still had that many copy editors left, can take it. And, some of this is not having necessarily, I don't want to say the right people, but it kind of is. They're changing their businesses. So when you're a people business and you need to change your business, you're going to change out a lot of people. And
you had some thoughts, Brian, on this is me interviewing you, of course.
Yeah, this is great.
You had some thoughts on the union response to it. Maybe you could share those.
Well,
maybe you could actually read one of the lines from their response.
Yeah. Well, okay.
I mean, we're not anti-union here on the program. I mean,
at least some of us
might be. Yeah.
No, I will say this. Like, look,
yeah. To anybody that's a union organizer, Alex is looking for a union at his new startup.
He would love to. He'll recognize that immediately. Look, I think the last era, it was very strange. Troy, you were for probably not to your liking, front and center of this. There was a lot of unionization that took place at a lot of these companies, right? And it's interesting to me when you look back on it, because a lot of it became contentious. It became contentious at Business Insider. I'm not blaming the reunion for the fate of these companies. There's
you
a
are,
lot.
actually.
No, I'm not. I don't, but I do. It is telling to me that Vice unionized, went bankrupt. Gawker unionized, went bankrupt. BuzzFeed unionized is worth less than less than its revenue, and on through the list. And again, these companies have continued to cut people, and then the unions come out with these statements. The News Guild said the layoffs of our talented coworkers and union members is another example of Axel Springer's brazen pivot away from journalism toward greed. And I get these statements that come out, but the reality is these unions have not protected, quote unquote. Maybe they got better like exit packages, I guess. It's really hard for me to say how this has led to stronger and more resilient businesses, but I guess that's not really the point exactly. But I know a lot of people who were involved in this, these companies have shrunk. And I don't think that's the main takeaway to the story, but it is part of it, at least from my standpoint.
I mean, it's hard to wrestle for power when there's no power to take. I mean, these businesses are under siege. So that's just a kind of bad, structure for the interplay between union and management. I think that in companies that are more resilient, like I've heard people from Reuters say that they're really thankful for the union. And Reuters is in a different economic position than someone like BI. But you can't protect a group of people in when a business is failing. It's just facts.
Yeah. And eventually that just happens. The other thing that I found this really interesting, I mean, you might not have found it interesting. Nick Quah does a great job covering the podcast world. And I think a lot of what's going on in the podcast world is a little bit of a harbinger of what is happening across the media with its intense decentralization. And also just the advantages that individuals have over institutions. But one is how that scrambling PR is an industry. I've always kept PR at arm's length. I've never enjoyed it, the fact that I've had to deal with it a lot. No offense to my PR people out there. But anyway, one of the things that it's changing with PR is you have to be everywhere, like all the time, all at once. And you see this a lot when people have books coming out. Like they're literally on every podcast. Jake Tapper has been on every single podcast I listen to. And it leads to some really weird...
Was he really on How Long Gone?
So he was on How Long Gone, which is a podcast by Chris Black. And it's like a different kind of weird podcast. It's two dudes, digital culture, and a lot of the banter, I guess, as the Brits would say. And Jake Tapper went on there, and you have these people who are dropped on How Long Gone and who have never listened to it before, and they have no idea what they landed in because it's a lot of just inside jokes. And now Jake Tapper, it has created a mini sort of controversy that will blow over in a day, basically claiming that they were saying that his son might be racist because he plays football and wants to be a cop. Now, if you listen to How Long Gone, the whole point of the show is this kind of just like dudes shit talking and whatnot. It's a bunch of jokes. Jake didn't get that memo, I guess.
It's like hipster bro stuff.
Yeah, it's hipster bro stuff. But yeah, I think we're going to find all sorts of things like that. Because I listened to an episode that Chris did on Semaphore Media Podcast, and he talked about an awkward one with Scott Galloway. So I immediately went and listened to that. I was like, oh yeah, I went all the way back in the archives. And it was super awkward because Scott Galloway had no idea who they were or why he was on it.
Yeah.
It was like Ali G.
I think Max Tanny was a bit verklempt on that episode. He's a bit of a fanboy.
Yeah, he is.
The book tour thing used to be that you had a lot of these traditional TV shows had a very common format. You kind of knew what you would get at, right? There was the morning show, there was the nightly shows, and you look at those folks, especially if you look at Supercuts, it was essentially like same answers, same kind of characters and archetypes. But now that you have to do that on podcasts, you don't have time to listen to all these things, and a lot of them are really weird, and they're based on like hours on hours of like understanding their hosts.
Yeah, you got to do your work. You got to do your prep, right, Troy?
Do the prep.
Yeah.
You got to do the prep, because if you look at Timothy Chalamet, and like he was great on all these.
Timmy did the prep.
He did the very niche podcast, but he also did like College Football Game Day, and he did a ton of prep. He was like able to talk about like Tulsa's quarterback or whatever. And that's what you got to do. And you got to be a 5-tool player these days. And I feel like
he did the Nardwuar thing. He knew exactly.
The Nardwuar thing, exactly. He knew everything about Nardwuar. I don't know what Nardwuar is. Alex knows.
And I don't know if at this stage it's like, is it that he did the prep, which I'm sure he did, but he also is someone that's obviously more clued up with current culture. And what shows up on people like Jake Tapper is that they're actually like probably pretty shielded and have no idea what's going on, and that's not great for your brand, I think.
No,
Timothy Chalamet.
I'm disappointed in you, Jake. He's a Philly guy, though. He's got that going for him. VO3 is
the book is a smash.
The book's a number one on the New York Times bestseller.
What does that even?
I listened to it. I read it.
What does that even mean? Like
now when you read a book, that's like something you want people to like give you a lot of kudos for and congratulate you for reading a book. So I'd like some congratulations.
I'm going to do that later in the pod.
Well done.
Alex, have you played it all with VO3? Have you tried it at all?
It's funny. I fully understand the capabilities of these things, but I have no interest in trying them out.
Okay, well, VO3 is it's their new video AI tool. It can go beyond, it's funny because these things have advanced so much, and now you can make things that look like real video. They look like real people, and you can see the direction it's going. And also, by the way, the Hollywood strike made sure that this is not going to be applied in movie making from Hollywood.
Did you see the one that Joanna did at the Wall Street Journal?
No.
Yeah.
They made the journal. Jonas Stern made a 2-minute movie about her interactions with.
It's called "We Made This Film with AI," and it's terrifying or whatever.
I'm Dr. Chip Motherboard, a totally real robotics expert. I am definitely not AI.
Okay, yeah, Chip is definitely AI, and I'm the real me.
Do you not know how to spell February? Put the R before you.
So they made a whole movie with a bunch of AI stuff. It's not a good movie, but it just shows you that this stuff is. I mean, it's constantly getting better, and it's becoming the voice stuff. Because now you can make them talk. It's actually coming to the point where it's going to start being hard to tell. I still don't. It's for some reason I can't. I still have like big issue with finding how people who engage in making this type of content are going to find value. I think there's going to be so much of it done that the value of the stuff is going to have zero. But I can see like fully customized training videos being pretty interesting for this type of stuff. Definitely, advertising that's fully tailored. But for me, the thing that's more interesting is where do you find value in other types of video? And my guess is like, I still want to see the real person that plays a guitar really well on TikTok or does a cool dance or stuff like that. It's going to be interesting to see where this finds its place. And so when people say this is really scary, this is the death of Hollywood, this is the death of actors, I don't find that particularly a useful way of looking at this. I think we're just going to see video everywhere and much more of it.
But compare this to the other tools that are coming out, because I kind of have a little bit of and I don't mean this bad for Fast Company, but maybe I do a little bit of a Fast Company experience where I used to read Fast Company articles and I'd be like, wow, this is amazing. And then I would read an article about like, say, like online advertising or something that I knew about. And I'd be like, wait, this is really superficial and not very good.
Yeah.
And I feel like a lot of these tools are that way, right? It's like you can vibe code some application, but if you're an actual developer, you know that it doesn't connect to the database and this has a massive security holes and it's not really a usable thing. It's great to like as a minimally viable thing. And I'm sure VO3 is the same thing. You're like, wow, I'm Steven Spielberg. And it's like, well, no, you're not really. I mean, I see that with the writing, right? Like this is very simple stuff. And AI has ruined, ChatGPT has ruined the M dash. The M dash is over.
Oh yeah, I asked my AI to remove it because I used to use it a lot, and everything I write looks like But
the other thing is that they love to do. It isn't this. It's this. It's like there's all these tells that are coming from AI that people are trying to now like get around.
Brian, but that's not. Is that really like all of these things? All of these criticisms are, let's say things that are going to be resolved. Let's say it's going to stop using M dashes and it's going to become a better and better writer, right? I don't think that I wouldn't place a bet against the fact that this is where this technology plateaus, right? Because I think the technology hasn't plateaued yet. I mean, part of why we haven't seen like a lot of tools come out and stuff like that is that we haven't had a stabilization in the technology and it keeps changing all the time, keeps getting better. So people building tools don't really know when to stop and start building stuff with it. But let's say all of these things get solved, because they will. And I think they will to the point where you won't notice. I think talking about the failings today nearly feels like a waste of time unless you're building the tools and you're trying to solve
Yeah, and I think you always have to look at cultural change as layers. It's never one thing replaces another thing. It usually augments another thing, and behavior changes on the margin, and some people adopt the new things, and then the old things still go on. And then slowly over time, something new emerges. So there's kind of, will this become an increasingly, like, think about text. Do you ever run your text through ChatGPT to edit it? Well, I think that's a natural thing to do. Do you ever use it to create ideas at the beginning of the process? Yes. Do you ever use it to write the entire essay? Probably not, but it might augment that. And so over time, things shift.
One thing I wanted to just, and then we'll get into the main thing. I don't know if you saw, I noticed this in a out-of-home ad on the subway platform, but Staples has brought back the easy button. This was a really successful ad campaign from the early 2000s.
Yeah.
And, Cannes is coming up, and Cannes is supposedly about advertising creativity. And I think the thing that's going to be talked about nonstop there is how AI is going to change ad creative. Like, it's an entirely new category of these AI-enabled companies that are going to make ads. And I don't know, Group M, which was this big media buying agency, they're not an ad creative agency, but like media buying agency. They buy the ads. Now they're rebranding it into WPP Media. And I went through the announcement, didn't even use the word agency once.
They use AI a lot.
They use AI a lot. They said they're an AI-enabled media company. I'm like, oh.
What does that mean?
Really?
Yeah.
And I think all week I'm going to ask people what their favorite ad campaign is.
Of all time?
And I don't know if
current?
anyone has any answers. And I'm just wondering, is this just a period where ad creativity is just seemingly not breaking through? Or are we at the end of using all the elements of storytelling? And you can come up with exceptions, but you know what I'm talking about, Alex. What ad do you know? Well, name for me an ad campaign that
in the last
is great.
12 months or?
Yeah, last year. It's your favorite ad campaign.
God, I cannot name one.
Yeah, me neither.
Yeah, no, there's nothing that even comes to mind where I'm just furious about it or, I think, that's an interesting question. Do you think people in the business will have maybe more awareness because they just pay attention to them?
there's going to be more like awareness, but the reality is the media industry, I mean, just like, WPP Media saying that they're a media company is so vast right now that the advertising part of it, even though they're technically supported by advertising, is kind of a miniature part of it. Like making ads as a way to build businesses is not really how it's done.
And the idea of a campaign is a little bit like the idea of a music album, right? It's like people, what does a campaign even mean in today's world when everything is heading towards like, I mean, Zuckerberg said it, right? The end state for their product is you just give them a goal. You don't even have to give them creative or anything like that. You just say, I just want to sell more deodorant. Right?
Yeah.
And the machine
and that's
will
the
just sell
direction.
more
And
deodorant.
these guys set the direction. And so that's what the industry is about, not like making great advertising. I mean, I think probably one of the greatest ad creatives of the last generation, which could have been literally the last generation of ad creativity, David Droga, he works for Accenture. I mean, like, that's just the reality. So definitely a changing business.
I think we're really going to see like the thinning out of the creative class, which really worries me. And it's not because AI is just going to replace creatives, is that a lot of the work that wasn't always particularly like the most creative work was sustaining a creative group of people, right? Like building campaigns, doing the writing, even kind of just like young up and coming creatives that worked in editing, that did all of these jobs that actually are just like being rapidly replaced with AI. People who used to make, like some secondary income from stock photography, all of that stuff. Those were all jobs that were saying, like, yes, I'm a filmmaker, but I work in an ad agency, most of the time so I can pay the bills. But, hopefully one day I'll that's a pipeline to a lot of our kind of like, creative talent comes from there. And I worry of how that's going to be decimated. Now, on the flip side of that, like, the people are saying, well, the tools will balance this out because you can go out and make a movie now with less people and stuff like that. But I don't know, like it kind of worries me, coming from that world, see what's happening to an industry which would at least like, I mean, I have no love for the advertising industry, but agencies did kind of support a lot of burgeoning talent coming up, and that's going away.
I mean, there have been lots of reports about how much what used to be Group Angus, WPP Media, will be cut in this. Adweek said that up to 45% will be impacted. It's unclear whether that's cut or.
I mean, I can see it. You used to walk into agencies and see a lot of people just doing work.
Well, there's a lot of moving data from one place to another, like in a lot of just work.
I mean, just the idea of like pitching a campaign would keep, a dozen people employed, as they cut and pasted stuff into a Keynote file, like that's likely like no longer going to be something that makes sense to them. So it's a bad place to be right now. Once again, it's grim. Troy's internet is gone. So Troy doesn't have
Troy's internet went down. Oh my God. Let's get into the episode regardless, whether Troy will rejoin. Okay. So I wanted to, we did one about Apple a couple of weeks ago. So I wanted to dig into Google. This is always dangerous because these companies have become so massive that, you could have like not just a podcast episode, but you could talk about them forever. So I want to kind of narrow it a little bit. But to me, what makes Google so fascinating is it's the most consequential company of the modern internet. And I remember starting to cover it back when like search engines were new. That's how old I am. And, Google had just arrived at the portal era and people didn't realize what search was at the time. And it's kind of funny to have lived through that and seen how dismissive people were of a new kind of paradigm, because this was the portal era. And it was like, okay, big deal. Like this, it's a search engine. Search was never a moneymaker. The search results pages were basically just remnant ad inventory. It was like chat. It was a place where you put just like remnant banner ads.
When you say Google people, you mean like the competitors, Google's competitors, didn't see it.
Yeah, I mean that they didn't search was not, first of all, it didn't work as well. A lot of it was still manual, and the portal, whether that was AOL and then Yahoo, was the way people were directed to information.
Exciting.
And with the explosion of information, search was the only way to make sense of it at the end of the day. And Google won that. And by becoming the front door to the internet, it created what I think is the greatest economic engine pretty much ever.
I think it was, and we have people in the audience that might have not lived through that. But I think as a consumer, the first time you used Google, right? Because I was an early adopter. We used all, I don't know if you were at that stage, but I had different, Hotbot was better at certain searches, and Excite.
Dogpile. Were you a Dogpile fan?
Dogpile. I was not a fan of any of one of them, but I felt pretty smart being able to know what to use when. But when Google came on, I didn't meet anyone at the time that didn't say this was incredible. Not only because the product felt really good, but it actually made the internet feel useful. It was profound, that shift. The internet wasn't that useful until Google came along.
Alex, the first story I ever wrote about advertising was actually I covered an Eric Schmidt talk to a group of internet advertising people. Nice. And he gave a lecture that basically told them, stop scaring people. All your ads are scaring people. He's like, we have this system where people ask us for stuff and we provide them helpful information. And yeah, I mean, Google used that control of the interface to amass power basically to dictate this entire area. I mean, it vanquished all of its rivals in search. And by the way it did it are the exact things that the DOJ is, quote unquote, investigating now. It cut the deals with AOL. They basically cut uneconomic deals to buy distribution because they realized that if they controlled all the distribution, they had basically a money printing machine. And so their rival at the time, which was Overture, could not compete because they didn't have their own search engine. They just supplied the paid search to others. And, it gobbled up then ad tech. And so it said, we're going to direct the traffic all around the internet, but we're also going to monetize that through our advertising system. It was a bargain basically at the end of the day. It was a tacit bargain, but it was a bargain.
They understood early on, and I think, or at least they set up the playbook for that. If you don't own the interface to something, right, you can stick in a slice of that entire market, right? So if you own the and it became, wow, we own the interface to the apps on our phone, we can take a 20-30% cut on anything like that. But what Google did in first mover advantage is that they became the interface for the internet, which was, and they executed really well, right? Google was an incredible product, Chrome was an incredible product, and they kept pushing for it just to keep that ownership. What happened over time is that it became less about product execution dominance and much more about wielding their kind of market power to strike these really lazy deals, right? But
that's the inevitable. I mean, everyone falls into that we talked about this with Apple, rentier capitalism. I mean, this is just how it takes place. Pretty soon you're like, why am I going to innovate? I've got all this distribution. Yeah. Why don't I just use the distribution might that I have?
Which is why I think it's the best thing, no matter how unsurgical the cuts are and they have to sell YouTube or Apple has to, change some things about the App Store. I think any kind of regulatory grenade that can be thrown into the mix is going to be great for these companies. I think it's going to be great long-term for these companies because they need an excuse to stop just doing what's best for their market share and start innovating again. It's going to be great for all of us.
Think about the $20 billion deal to Apple, right? I mean, for Apple, why would you build your own search engine? Why would you rival Google when you just put $20 billion just to the bottom line?
It would be, I mean.
You don't need an MBA to make that decision.
I would make that decision. I think it's an impossible decision not to make when you're faced with that, right? It's an offer you cannot refuse. And if you're And if you decide to refuse it, then you're just being incompetent at your job, right? Tim Cook cannot say no to that. It's pure profit, $20-30 million. Why would you stop doing that?
So the other thing is the take on Google at the time was they're a one-trick pony, right? And it was search is the one thing they can. They can't do social networking. They can't do all that. This was always said about Google. But here's the thing. That trick was everything, like everything. You can get, if you're going to get 1 out of 10 things right, like if you got search, that's okay. And they really didn't have a good track record beyond search. I mean, search was like 98% of their business for a long time.
I mean, is it even search or is it advertising? Because the way the way I kind of organize Google is that it's essentially an advertising company that became great at all the things that feed into that advertising, right? So advertising is like 260 billion, like 75% of Google's revenue is advertising. And then non-advertising revenue is like $91 billion, like 25%, right? Out of those $91 billion, 43% is 43 billion, like about half is Google Cloud. But I would say that even Google Cloud was built entirely that entire infrastructure in the beginning was built to support their advertising business. At some point, Google switched from being a search company to an advertising company, and everything feeds into that. Like even YouTube, right? YouTube is like 30 billion a year or something like that. It's a massive business. That's an advertising business, and Google's an advertising company, and which is why, like, I think it's not, YouTube is famous for killing products. And a lot of people say, well, it's not, if it's not search, it gets killed. I don't think that's entirely true. I think it's if it's not advertising, it gets killed. YouTube's going to be fine. They've managed to monetize Gmail somewhat, but they're an advertising company. They're an advertising network with products attached to it. And that's, I think, is the mentality,
I don't know. I mean, because to me, like Google does a lot of advertising now, right? Particularly with YouTube and doing upper funnel stuff. But really, Google sells distribution. And when I hear advertising, I think of Cannes. I think of that world. And I think of what Google built was saying, we're gonna be distribution focused. So we're going to be completely user focused. And this is how they became like powerful, right? Like leave aside the compromises it's made as it's become a monopolist. But they basically have said, we're toll takers in a lot of ways. Like a lot of their advertising, but it's the same way, like, I don't really believe that Amazon is now an advertising company. They have a giant advertising business, but it's a distribution business. It's not, I mean, outside of the ads, I think when you look Prime.
But I think it's important to look at like what pillars a company sits on and how it makes decisions. And if, Apple is very much still a hardware company, and it dictates a lot of the way they do things and they think about stuff. It's like very intentional. Amazon is very much a logistics company, so everything around Amazon is built around its logistics. I think it's much more of a logistics company than it is a commerce company. It's about the thing about that Amazon does great is gets one thing from one place to another. And Google, I think the way it operates, the way decisions are made, the way it prioritizing things is very much like all geared around, I think, advertising. Because even if you look at search is a massive business, but they have other massive businesses. YouTube, their Google network, like, YouTube ads and the broader Google network is $70 billion. It's like it's a massive chunk of that revenue.
I definitely don't agree. Because I mean, like advertising just happens to be how they make money. Like they don't care. Like you will never find Sundar Pichai at Cannes. Like you got to be kidding me.
But the same way you won't see Tim Cook at a gaming conference telling everyone that a vast majority of their revenue, App Store revenue, comes from whales playing Candy Crush. Like, of course, they don't want to be what they are. But at the end of the day, that's how they make decisions. Like, which is why,
was told to me earlier in my career, it was Dave Morgan. He said, Brian, the thing about advertising is it gets sold, not bought, except for Google. Google's ads are the only ads that get bought, not sold. And Facebook now is that way. Meta is that way. Amazon is that. All this retail media are ads. Oftentimes they're ads that get bought, not sold. And that's because like they're distribution. They're not like ads.
Fair.
That's the sort of difference that I make.
Fair.
Maybe it's like a bit of a splitting hairs. But let's get into like where Google is now, because, AI is something that it was very early to. It is the forerunners of AI research, really. And I think you can draw a direct correlation between its advertising business and AI. I don't think it's a coincidence that Google was so focused on AI, more so apparently than Apple was, because you can justify AI because machine learning and AI can improve ad performance, and you can do all that research. Now, Google had this money-making machine, right? And I look at it almost like how the zero interest rate era, when we look back on all the things we didn't do when we could have done them during it. I don't know if Google necessarily used that unbelievable privilege of basically having limitless capital. They screwed up a lot of different things, but they did buy YouTube. That was pretty good. They were early with AI research, but AI is now, at least in the form of ChatGPT, threatening the core of their business. Now, it's been a couple years since ChatGPT. None of this has really shown up in the numbers with Google. I feel like it's the shoe that has never dropped. Only when Eddie Q said that searches were going down was that like a tangible manifestation that this is hurting Google's core business.
Let's not go into Gemini stuff. Let's just look at Google, just like Google's list of products, right? Because there was a whole generation of Google where it was about just like releasing all of these new products, all of these new ideas.
20% time. Remember 20% time?
Yeah. And Gmail came out of that, and Google Wave came out of that, and Hangouts came out of that.
They claim that a bunch of shit came out of that. That like I think don't.
Oh, the 20% itself is maybe more marketing, but what I'm saying is like Google was like throwing a lot of stuff at the wall that weren't directly things that they felt that I think like were easy to turn into an advertising product, right? And a lot of these things have come and gone. A lot of them, like I still mourn. Like, you remember the Google Reader, the RSS feed reader? That was the way I was reading all my news at the time. It was fantastic.
Oh yeah, well, I mean that's
but a lot of big products that are part of their foundation.
Have you seen this killedbygoogle.com? Then
Killed by Google.
You got to go to killedbygoogle.com. It's a bunch of tombstones for things that Google has.
There we go.
Has killed over the years.
That's right. Oh, so the Google Jamboard is at the top. We used to have one of those at Airbnb.
Hangouts,
like Hangouts, YouTube Originals.
Google Wave. I was a Wave influencer.
I really, but here's the thing. Like, back to my Google being an advertising company, or at least being guided by that. If you see, there's a big correlation between the products that are killed and the products where advertising couldn't be probably integrated into them. I think that's key, because they had an amazing ability to execute. They had a lot of incredible engineers sitting on the bench, willing to work on things. And the things that have survived are kind of nearly more telling, right? Where like the things that have survived are things like Chrome, which is like you said, like a distribution mechanism, gets people in. Android is even further along the stack. I mean, they just want to build they just want to build gates that get you into more gates, right? So like, well, okay, the search was the thing. Well, the risk then becomes like, what happens if somebody takes their browser and sends the search elsewhere? Well, let's make the most popular browser, right? Okay, now that we've got the most popular browser on desktop, mobile phones are coming. Well, what happens if somebody puts a different browser that has a different search? So let's do Android. All of these things are to feed into the advertising funnel. Same things with Maps. Maps is an advertising platform. The outliers are all this infrastructure.
So basically, your
stuff,
point is that Google has been a one-trick pony, but that trick is not search. That trick is advertising.
The trick is getting people, getting kind of like, I mean, you could call it distribution, but it's getting that, like, owning that funnel of people to anything on the internet and being able to, charge people to advertise against that. I think there's a subset of products that do not exist in that realm. I think Google Docs is one of them. I think the advertising on Gmail, I'm not sure is a huge business for them, but these seem to be more like, audience capture, because you get people to register, you have their account details, you have their credit cards, you do stuff like that. But yes, I think if you look at a lot of their decisions, at some point in the product lifecycle at Google, somebody looks at it and go like, well, how can we plug this into our money machine? And if you're like building a whiteboard product, you're like, gulp, and then you get killed. Which is why I'm really worried about Waymo. At some point, somebody's going to say, all right, well, let's plug this into the money machine. And they're going to say, well, I guess we could put banners in the car, because I don't know.
Well, it's interesting because I think I don't know. I think Google is moving away from advertising.
Oh, wow.
In some ways, I mean, if you look at like what it came out with, because I think they need to diversify. Clearly, they've had to for a while, right? I mean, they've got a massive business, and it is still primarily advertising. And it's something that I was listening to. I think the More or Less podcast, and I think that was a really smart thing when they're talking about. I think it was there where that basically you're buying like a computer, like you're basically buying compute with AI, right? And that you're just used to paying thousands of dollars. That's why I think it's really interesting, these really high priced AI subscriptions. I mean, you look at Veo. What's Veo priced at?
Like $250 or something
a month.
Yeah.
Right.
But Brian, yes, sure. But it turns out like getting corporations to pay for stuff via advertising is always going to be a better business than asking consumer to pay for a product. Like there's very little money. Like if you look at the distribution of their revenue model right now, like I said, like 260 billion, 75% is advertising related. And then out of the non-advertising revenue, which is 90 billion, half of it is Google Cloud, which I would say like the Google Cloud infrastructure is very much built on the fact of the advertising infrastructure, right? So then you kind of go like, all right, well, what else they got? They got like, maybe $1 billion or so in Waymo, forget that. And then subscriptions, $40 billion, which includes Google Premium, like Google One stuff and Play Store stuff. Their Play Store revenue is I think a third of what iOS revenue is. So App Store revenue, this type of revenue, which is non-advertising revenue for Apple services revenue, is huge. Google hasn't made a dent compared to the moneymaker, which is like, yeah, let's put ads in front of people. I think they're just so good at it. I mean, I spoke to Google people and they say at some point, no matter how successful your product is at Google, somebody looks at it and there's a pie chart that shows what the dent it's making, and your slice is so invisible that it gets squeezed out by the rest of the pie chart, which is advertising.
Well, it has to be very difficult. I had heard this so many years ago, so I can only imagine how it is now. Like to build a business within Google that even makes sense for a top executive to even know exists, like where that bar has to be is massive.
It absolutely is.
You can't just have like $100 million business within Google. Nobody even knows it exists.
How great would it be to split this all up? And I know we're going to talk about AI and the future of Google in the next episode when Troy joins us again. But it has been probably the hardest thing for them to go against that stream, because AI, we haven't figured out advertising with AI yet.
Well, I think that's a good segue to, because I know you have a hard stop as we always know.
Yeah.
Because I feel like the last era was defined by advertising. The last era of digital technology, really. I mean, the internet it's an advertising medium at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And when Google was ascendant, everyone was scrambling to make ad-supported software. I remember Microsoft was doing we're going to put ads in Word, and that was just accepted that everything was going to have an advertising model. And I don't know if that's necessarily going to be the case with AI. I think ads always find a way. I'm long ads because they just do. People usually choose ads over paying for stuff. But I think it's going to be a more diverse business model.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing that now, right? Like, but it's also hard. So I mean, I was one of the hopefuls that was hoping that things would move to the services business, and Netflix was one of those places that felt like, hey, you can build an incredible business purely through subscriptions by omitting ads. But even they realize that you tap out at some point, and at some point you have to put ads in the product. And not only that, but like you actually might be making more revenue from ads than you are from anything else, from any of your paid subscriptions. So what's transpiring now is like you're seeing a lot of the paid subscriptions are becoming really premium, really expensive, and then they're pushing a lot of customers towards their ad platforms. And it's likely that the same thing will happen with AI. The thing that's hard to gauge with AI is that so much of it is subsidized right now and is also super expensive. We don't know how much cheaper it's going to get, how quickly. We don't know how much they're being subsidized. But at some point, you're going to have a contraction in the user base if you force them to move to a subscription model. We know that. And unless there's a huge behavioral shift. And we also don't know what type of advertising is feasible on that. Like there's a lot of very smart people right now looking at advertising. And my guess is that there's already advertising products that are being successfully tested that would be hugely profitable, but there's some anxiety around the public perception of an AI pitching. Like right now, everybody's trying to tell you, like, trust my AI, trust Claude, or trust ChatGPT, or trust Gemini, because they give you good answers and they've got good vibes. Everybody's scared to take the first step and say, and have like say, hey, by the way, you should get, if your breath stinks, you should.
Yeah, that's funny that you say that, because I started to see like a little carousel in ChatGPT results that were like related products to like a search. It was like something about like podcasting. I was like, here's some podcast microphones, and the disclaimers that they weren't making any money off of like a product recommendation were like kind of a tell. It's like, whoa, like you're very defensive about this.
Yeah. So it's gonna be interesting. I don't think Google's in that brand. I think, honestly, the first ones to try that out, the shameless ones, Amazon, they're just gonna do it. They have no shame when it comes to that stuff. They were the first ones to like give you my paid Prime account. All of a sudden, they started showing ads. No other streamer did that without changing a price or something. It's like, well, you just get ads now. But yeah, I think that what's probably holding them back is since there's a lot of like they're just all trying to capture customers and build affinity with AI, because they also know that AI is a relationship. It's a very different type of product. It's much more relational than anything else, that they could really ruin that by kind of trying to feed advertising in a way that feels like uncanny. And so it's going to be interesting to see, honestly.
All right, let's leave it there.
All right. Okay.
So Alex and I, before you got disconnected, Alex and I went through basically a little walk down memory lane of Google and how Google became Google. But he was basically hammering on this point that Google's just an advertising company at the end of the day. And that has defined how the company has evolved. And to even call it like a search company or tech company isn't totally right, but it's really an advertising company. And we sort of set that up as a way to discuss the AI challenge. That's what I want to pick up with you. But what do you think of what is Google to you right now?
So I'm sorry that I dropped off. I hope you gave folks some context. I think that's an interesting take, but obviously Google's far more than an advertising company. So it's a little bit ridiculous. And my take is actually, I would put it on the bull side for sure. I think that I don't know if you guys have gone through the history of Google. My history with Google is, one of, I would say, kind of wonder and like mostly good feelings, like optimism, positivity. And, I mean, I've sat downstream of Google decision-making and had to struggle with that as an executive and as a investor in companies. So, I mean, I think that there's obviously mixed feelings, but like, I remember little things like when Yahoo Mail had, I don't know, like a 4 megabyte maximum, and Google came out and basically said with Gmail that there's no storage limitations.
People thought it was an April Fool's Day joke because they did it on
when they launched it on
you
April
can't do
Fool's.
that.
And so like that was a sort of remarkable technological gift. Over the years, the improvements in search have just been remarkable. Their ability to
Have they?
I mean, I think that, as a tool that indexes much of human knowledge, it's really, really useful. It's just that it's a big part of my life. Now, clearly Google Plus was a fiasco. They never did anything in messaging. They own YouTube. YouTube is a huge, the thing I spend the most time on with videos. So like,
Alex went through, we had killedbygoogle.com up with all the things that Google has killed over the years.
Sure. I mean, they work in technology, right? You got hits and misses. It's like being a record executive. You're gonna some work, some don't. You got to try a lot of things. But if you look at the things that are remarkable about Google, from currently the stuff that they're doing with AI probably leads the industry. I remember watching the documentary on Google's, what was it that won the Master of Go. I thought that was remarkable. Today, I think if you use Gemini, you'll be delighted. It's a really great tool. It's incredibly fast. I prefer, just because I'm used to it, I suppose, ChatGPT. But my take is a little bit different. And what I'll try to summarize it. It's that, for better or worse, the way we see Google is as a search company, as you point out. And I think that right now they're in a transition period where Google will be far more important to your life, because AI's use cases are more expansive. And I think that, TBD on their ability to drag kind of multimodal AI into more parts of your existence, be it through a next generation glass, or how Android evolves, or how the browser becomes something more than a place to load pages and search a Google index. I think that Google becomes a more ambient part of how we live, as opposed to just a set of tools. And I think that's their challenge, because they're sort of in the middle of navigating disruption right now. And we've seen that. There's lots of analogies, whether you want to look at linear television to streaming, or print publishing to digital publishing. Like, Google is in the middle of this transition where they were a very capable search index with a wicked monetization model, and that model will transition to something new. We don't know exactly how they will insert themselves in a consumer's query, but we do know that there is an intense amount of economic potential in any query that people are making, or that the energy that's directed at Google, and that more of their revenue, as we've seen, kind of in a good way, in a surprising way, more of the revenue will come from people paying for AI. But there will be a lot of people that don't pay for AI. And as such, it'll need an advertising model. And I think it's really hard for anyone to get in front of Google on that, because the kind of mode of having, first of all, their technology, of having relationships with literally millions of customers, of having a bidding system, of having all the algorithms. And so I think they're going to lead at AI monetization with Meta. I think that they're going to find more ways to be part of what we do every day on account of AI. And I think that Google is going to be kind of as or more dominant in the next generation than they were in the last.
Okay, so you've got you think Google has way more advantages than disadvantages. I mean, I think the big one to me is, and Sundar Pichai had mentioned this, was just as Google became a verb, ChatGPT is becoming synonymous. It's being genericized in people's minds when it comes to AI answers. It's like, oh, you get ChatGPT. I mean, the ChatGPT colon is a thing. Alex and I talked about
but I would argue, so I think that that's a great point. And I think that consumers love the simplicity of a singular service. So Google is search, OpenAI is chat. And I think that if I was to take anything away from that, Brian, I think that the product challenge is the one that is most beguiling for Google, because their branding and their sort of product introductions right now, it feels very, very complicated to me. Like, what model am I using? What's Gemini versus Google? What's kind of new search versus old search? What's this little abstract at the beginning of the page? what are these new things that are coming out? I don't know if you've seen.
You mean Gemini 2.5? Are you talking about Gemini 2.5 Flash, 2.5 Pro preview?
Yeah, and I'm talking about there's a new thing called Mariner. There's their multimodal model capability called, I think it's called Atlas. So there's a huge amount of complexity.
But that's not VO3 or Notebook LM.
VO3 is a video editing tool with that it now can talk.
Yeah.
So what I would say is their dominance from chips to compute to algorithms to products are very, very hard to displace. I think that they're moving more quickly. You have an agitated founder that's like in there coding with people. So you've seen them at the last I/O released a remarkable number of products, so many that it's hard to keep track of. And I think if they can get the piece right, that is about simplicity, product development, consumer adoption, that they're, like a kind of almost unstoppable. We'll see what happens with their like partnerships on the face. They're doing this thing called Android XR, which is basically what I would see as a kind of defensive maneuver against Meta getting, one-upping them, with glasses. And I'm sure Apple will ultimately compete in the same arena. And Google's running at that. I think that the economic value of an AI dominant firm, or even one that has like 30% of the market, is more than having 90% of search.
AB, you're here. Tell me about the market, how the market views Google right now. I mean, it trades, according to some AI research, at a P multiple discount to others in its field, like Microsoft, Amazon, or Apple. Is this just the market seeing the threats that it faces, or what is the market saying about where Google is right now as a business?
From a revenue perspective, search still continues to grow, right? So yes, AI is eating away a little bit. People are starting to do more of their searches and get their questions answered in other companies' products. But from just like a market share and where you're seeing revenue growth, like there's still double-digit revenue growth in the core business. And then they have built all these other subscription offerings and things in both the consumer side and the B2B side that are still really valuable businesses. So I think it's trading probably at a slight discount to some of the things that you referenced.
It's trading in a forward PE of about 17 to 18 compared to like high 20s in its competitive set.
That's quite a bit, isn't it?
Yeah, sometimes I like to go off of, these, you can reference a couple different multiples, but like EBITDA multiples is like they're still within their segment pretty closely. I think there's businesses like a Facebook that are going to trade a little bit higher because people see, because it's all about user intent, right? And I think that's where AI can really take the future of Google is like through AI, through knowing a lot more about you, through memory and things like that, you can continue to perfect intent and deliver the right advertising, because the more you know about what a user wants, you can charge more for the advertiser. And so, you see Meta trading at a better multiple because they're just growing a bit quicker. But I think Google's still a very dominant business and their growth rates are exceptional. And they continue to take market share in sort of unique things, like the fact that YouTube Premium and YouTube TV are like hyper dominant is something that if you ask people in the traditional TV world if that would be something that existed 5 years ago, they would say no way. But I think Google has just done a really good job of bundling these different products together. I signed up for I think one surprising thing is I signed up for the more expensive AI offering from Google, the $250, and they're basically grouping in a lot of products, right? You get YouTube Premium, like you get all these other things, and I think they just want to increase the attachment rate to other products as well.
They're grouping Premium in YouTube Premium in with that $200 AI product.
Why not?
At a $250,
They'll just throw in all kinds of things. What I'm interested in, Alex kind of poo-pooed it a little bit, but he's not here anymore, was whether this ends up being a little bit of a shift away from advertising for Google. I mean, a lot of what you're doing is you're renting compute at the end of the day. And I don't know whether, I think Google's going to always have like a massive advertising business, but this seems like an opportunity. And it seems like just this area is moving more towards, yes, advertising, but also these subscriptions.
the trick that media has employed, which has worked successfully for a very long time, starting with newspapers, is you deliver a product to consumers that is offset significantly by advertising. So, when newspapers were running super well, 80% of the revenue was from advertising. And so if you frame that of like why Google has been such a sticky product for so long is they built this amazing advertising engine that allows them to deliver a better search product than anybody else can. And so I think the AI experience that wins in the future is I think as soon as you start to toll consumers, it's going to cause friction to the point of requiring robust advertising to be included in the searches. Consumers want help finding products, and as the provider of the information, you're always going to have an opportunity to sort of step on the scale and push people in certain directions. So I think advertising is going to be fundamental to the future of AI.
I think that's right. And I think that what we may not have appreciated way back, Brian, is there's essentially 2 ad companies in the world now, maybe 3. And that's Meta, Google, and Amazon. And they all have a level of sophistication that no one else can achieve. The remarkable thing about Meta is they're able to turn kind of browsing into intent. The remarkable thing about, Google is their, auction system and what they've done with algorithms, and the fact that they own the biggest video platform on the planet. And, Amazon has distinguished themselves in retail and now a fast growth video business. So, I think Alex is right that those are really, really, that advertising is a vitally important part of its future. But to this point, we are because we shop, we buy things. And, I think what you'll see is the next generation of Google advertising will be even more complex than the last, meaning like they will offer retailers the ability to let you to virtually try on clothing. They will take more and more of the affiliate layer because they'll stand between you and a transaction. They'll take, money they'll continue to take money from travel companies, from car rental companies, from people that rent houses, from people that sell, financial products and insurance. And like they will be the ones that are sort of increasingly at the sort of toll booth to any kind of transactional opportunity. And it's just, I don't think AI is going to end that.
No, I think it's going to accelerate that, right? And I think so I'm not worried about Google. I'm not. I think they're going to be fine. That's my control.
Well, of course they're going to be fine.
But what I'm worried about is, and I'm worried, I'm worried for everyone who is downstream of Google, which is pretty much 99%.
Yeah, but there I'm less worried than I used to be.
Okay, give me the case for not being concerned, because it seems to me very clear that Google's interests are diverging from, say, publishers' interests completely. Like they're not.
Oh, no. I agree. It's over. It's just over. That distribution model is coming to an end, and that ad system is coming to an end. I mean, even look at how do you think it feels for a publisher? No, I think that like the old days, your economic value will be the number of direct, intimate connections you have with a market, be it any number of connection points, print, email, physical, people coming directly to your website. And I think over time, there will be ways to monetize intellectual property via AI. So there will be a system that will slowly evolve that rewards creators that ultimately feed the aggregator that is AI. Yeah. Now, I think that if our mental model for the internet was pages, the future of it is more like everything is personally created by an algorithm and it's a series of databases. And a lot of it is not even seen by a human. It's navigated by a robot, by an agent. And if you just think about like the complexity in the ad world that is that is forthcoming, it's like, how do you even tell someone who's buying advertising from you what is human and what is bot? Because increasingly, I mean, remember, like half of the impressions on the internet are going to be bot related.
It's everywhere. Like I even the click data, I can't give click data to advertisers and newsletters.
I don't know.
It's all bot.
Right. It's a mess right now. I would say that the entire system that we kind of grew up with of kind of banners and, anything that's page related advertising is in a lot of trouble. So it's got to be transactional. And it can't be about viewing something on a web page. That's all going to change. And the way that publishers, I think, Neil's right. It's Google Zero. You will still get drips and drabs from distribution points, but it won't be 60% of your traffic coming from Google. That's over. Now, will the world and content creators slowly regenerate and and create a new equilibrium? I think they will. I think they'll find a way to do it. So what we're seeing, back to the beginning of the episode, is there's going to be a lot of roadkill through this transition. And it'll be people that were sort of page dependent, like the BIs of the world. But people still want content. People still make content. People will find a way through. You'll be fine.
Okay.
Let me play. I think Google will be okay in the near and medium term, but let me just play the other side of it. So I think what was amazing about Google at the beginning is they had one thing to perfect, which was search, and then they added all these other things on to the consumer experience to add value. Today, when they do their I/O announcement and they release their AI products, like we can't list, we throw out all these random names that are coming from all these different groups in Google, and they're basically having to satisfy the demands of like 10 different product teams.
Oh yeah,
right?
It's like a State of the Union address, or the old kinds
Right.
before now.
People who win now, it's going to be based on who has a direct connection to the consumer with an AI and with an agent resource, right? So the way that we interact with AI today is not going to be the future, right? It's going to be in much more of like an agent where you tell it to do something and it goes and does it for you and comes back later on. And I think that the one place where OpenAI has an opportunity to really lead here is they don't have to worry about 10 product teams to satisfy. They're hyper-focused on getting consumers to sign up and do the AI experience, and that's their only focus. And so I think that's the one way where they can gain market share and start to displace Google, is like their core focus is that, and not satisfying 20 other teams around Gmail and all these other products. Because ultimately, it becomes like a pretty winner-take-all marketplace, I think, for some of these platforms, where if you have the flywheel of delivering consumer value, you get more people using your product or service, you can continue to lean in on marketing and all these other things that makes it more efficient and a more valuable business. So I think that's the one place where Google might struggle and might start to lose market share significantly, is just this plethora of products that they're having to service and come up with AI solutions. Like, what's crazy today is you can't go to any of Google's AI products and say, build me a Google sheet with this data. It just doesn't exist, which is crazy to think. But then you go, oh, well, the reason why that's probably an issue is because the product teams don't talk to each other. So the person building the basic ChatGPT replica doesn't interface directly with the Google Sheets team, right? And so there's a little bit of friction. Today, I can ask OpenAI to make me a Google Doc, a Word doc or an Excel. And it can help put these things in, 15 seconds. But either Sergey helps harmonize the teams, and so they're focused on a couple things, or I think ChatGPT and OpenAI.
Yeah, it feels like they're just trying to flood the zone with stuff. There's just a ton that's coming out, and it's incoherent, at least. I don't know. You would have to just spend all your time studying this. As a normal person, I don't know how anyone could understand just the velocity of things that are coming out, of Google, and they're all over the place. I still don't understand why Notebook LM is different from Gemini. What are they doing? Just make one thing.
The counterpoint is most consumers are not reading and digesting all these news releases and stuff like that. They're just continuing to Google. And so you could, the counterpoint is look, they're just going to add it to Google search, make Google search better. They're going to add it to, you see it in Gmail today, right? The autocomplete and things like that. And so there are ways for them to win and still have this mass confusion around all these different model releases by just including it. 99% of consumers are just using this stuff in very basic ways, and they're not creating videos and things like that. And so they don't really necessarily need to win there. They're flooding the zone with innovation to get people to talk about it, but the core consumer is just happy to have a better product to use.
It is a good point, AB. And if you look back to the search wars where there were, help me here, Brian, we had Excite, Lycos, Yahoo.
Dogpile got mentioned earlier. Don't forget Dogpile. Meta search engine. Excite. I1. They had a sweepstakes every day based on the number of searches you did.
Google was faster, simpler, better. And it took the entire market.
Yeah, sweepstakes didn't end up being a killer app.
No, I mean, there was nothing. They took it all. And it'll be interesting to see how much of the market OpenAI takes. I suspect it will be much less.
You can sort of say maybe Google has a moat because they have all this Gmail data and things like that. But Google can't restrict OpenAI from scanning all your email. Otherwise, it becomes an antitrust issue, right? And so some of the different data feeds that Google has today that it can leverage, I think, become pretty generic across the board because you can just tie everything with a couple clicks.
Yeah, but I think the key difference is that search was an entirely new behavior and there was no precedent for it. So everybody started using Google and they never looked back. Today, everybody uses Google and they're now introducing a product, and the problem that product, if you use it, is really good. Their chat competitor is really good. I think the biggest problem is bifurcating the use case in the mind of the consumer between searching for something and chatting is really a hard product problem. It's a real hard place to be. Am I there to go find a website or find something, or am I there to interact and go back? And maybe that's just me. I think of Google I think when I want to do research or deep research or interact with a chatbot, I go to ChatGPT. When I want to find something on the web, I use Google.
Yeah, that's the brand. That's why I feel like a lot of these companies move from being product companies to being distribution companies. And that Apple, that was sort of my takeaway from our Apple episode, in that they sort of moved from creating great products to just using their distribution to build an amazing business, which is fine. There's room for both.
One interesting thing for me as I use this technology more is that it starts to reframe how much you rely on them and how much you trust them. And so you start to ask questions. I went to a concert over the weekend and I asked it sort of like a multi-step question, which was I'm going to this concert at 7:00. Where should I eat before? At the venue? Where should I stand? And it was a much better thought partner to me. And I don't know if I would have known that question to ask a couple months ago, but you see the relationship that you're building with this technology getting stronger in a much more personal way, which I think lends itself to even strong, because you're going to trust it more, right? And so it can drive you to these, that's where I think advertising becomes core. So in the All In interview that Sundar did, one interesting thing that I found surprising is they mentioned this idea of a holding company, and he said, we're not a holding company. And I think when you look back at media businesses, they effectively became holding companies, right? They own different types of media companies, and there was value in sharing advertising and shared services and things like that. I think as you've seen, I think Apple has a bunch of different lines of business, but both Alphabet and Meta have tried to turn on other business units, but they've never been able to replicate, even at a small percentage, the core business they have. It's the power of these digital platforms is just completely in a different dimension than what we saw with media conglomerates of the past. And I was surprised when Sundar basically pushed back on this idea of a holding company, because that's, I think, why they moved to the Alphabet.
They changed the name then. Well, this is tangential perhaps, but why did Meta stick but Alphabet not? Nobody uses Alphabet. Everyone just says Google, but people use Meta.
To me, Alphabet was only ever a brand for Wall Street.
People were getting a little bit frustrated by some of these bets that they were taking. And so by separating it out, they were able to show the value of the core business and then take out all these other bets where they were just investing capital.
I mean, I think the Sundar thing is Google is an AI company. And as such, it's kind of singular. Now, can they figure out how to manifest AI in ways that we all use it? And I think that's the big thing that we'll see. I remember, though, when we decided to accelerate progress in digital in the publishing business by splitting out digital and print, because the people were different, the processes were different, the product was different, and we needed to have different competencies. And eventually they all came back together. And I think what has to happen at Google is, they're going through the same thing. Like the search team and the AI product team ultimately need to create one product. And that's going to take some time.
Yeah, I think the benefit, and this happened at media companies too, where you had these A/B structures. The Google founders still control the company, right? Facebook, same thing. Mark still controls the company. And so Sergey made this in the All In interview. He made this comment about how there is an internal document which basically would not allow coders to use some of the LLMs to help on the coding products. And he's like, I saw that and we instantly I was like, what the fuck is this, right? Like, why is this a restriction? And so this is to why Google can stick around, is you have founders who can go in there and basically say, guys, what the fuck? Like, let's make this work and let's go fast here. And I think that's a unique thing for such a large company. Most of the time, the control, even when founders are still involved, is allocated to the board and things have to move slower. But with both Alphabet and Meta, the founders are still in control. And I think that's really important for this next phase.
Okay. Should we wrap it up with good products?
Let's try. Okay. It's certainly not going to be optimum. The providers of fiber to my place, and it just gone down twice in 2 days, disrupting our podcast.
Put an optimum on blast.
You know what is fun in Shelter Island is the dump is great. It's kind of a social experience. Everybody goes to dump, you chit chat with people, you put your stuff in the glass or the plastic. I like that. There's also another thing I've noticed to coax people in early. And now this is going to sound like I'm getting old, but if you go to dinner before 6, you can get a kind of a happy meal for $40. Like if you go to one of the...
That's a great deal.
No, but like 3 courses, like a salad, a main course, and a dessert. Because if you weren't there for happy hour, it would be like $100. That's nice. But you know what is a good product? No, you know what is a good product? And again, this will take us back to the early internet days, is Chewy. Do you know Chewy? You don't have a dog, do you?
I don't have a dog.
Nobody wants to go get a 40-pound bag of dog food. Nobody. It's not a thing. And, Chewy is an incredible e-commerce thing. One of the things that I've noticed about it is their cross-sells work. Every time we order from Chewy, we order a bunch of dog toys. So not only do they sell the dog food, they deliver it wherever you are. You don't have to carry it from the store. They also end up selling you squeaky balls. And do you remember the first big internet blowout was what, pets.com? Remember the sock puppet?
Yeah, sure.
Well, it worked in the end, and it's called Chewy. It's amazing.
Customer service for Chewy is really good too.
All right, Chewy.
Sunset Beach is open for the season.
I'll come out there.
So we look forward to having both of you.
Anyway, that's the episode.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for
Thank you,
invitation.
both.